Hello and welcome to the very first episode of The Old Garage. I'm Wild Bill, and actually it is The Old Garage. Y-E, or the letter Y in Middle English was pronounced T-H. I mean, I married a linguist, so I get to learn those sort of things. My channel, as you know, is brand new. I'm just getting the wrapper off of it right now, and I've had a few questions on the Q&As for some of the episodes that we've had, so we're going to go ahead and address some of those, and we're going to see how this rolls. So, let's get on with the questions. So, Gabriel F. has asked the following. If you were looking to buy a commercially available gas-powered automobile early in the year 1900 with no budget or geography issues, presumably for personal use, what would you get? Now, this is an interesting one because frankly, in early 1900, let's just go the first quarter of 1900, I mean, there really wasn't an American car that I would really buy. I mean, there were some makes out in the U.S. Duryea was there, Locomobile, and a few others, but really the action was in Europe. And there were a couple of different types of cars that were being made at that time. Cycle cars, or cars that were pretty much like bicycles, were common. You also had light cars that were being built, and the folks, you know, the rich people that wanted the big cars also had some different makes available. Many French makes, some British cars, as well as German, and even others. I mean, heck, you even had you know, the Errol Johnson in Scotland. You had the Egg in Switzerland. I mean, there were a lot of different vehicles available at that time. Me personally, money, geography wasn't an object. I would have picked the 1899 to 1900 British Daimler with the Phoenix engine. In fact, probably would have tried to buy this one, which this car pictured is actually the very car that Lord Montagu used to be the first person to race a British-made car with a British driver on the continent of Europe. So yeah, I think that's the car at that time I would have got. You know, give me another year, I would have bought a Mercedes. Give me another 2 years, I would have bought a Mors. But in early 1900, the current Daimler offering, the four-cylinder Phoenix engine Daimler by Daimler of Britain, is the car I would have bought. Now I have a Spirit Fox MY has posed a couple of questions. We'll go do this first one. And it was regarding my first episode, and his question is, why didn't Cugnot continue his experiments? Given the time frame, it wouldn't be the revolution for at least another decade or so before things really started falling apart. Why didn't he build more engines to do engine-y things? Excellent question. And the issue is that, first of all, Cugnot at that time was already middle-aged, and his career was in the Army was pretty much, you know, coming to a close. And therefore his funding never continued after that, particularly after he crashed two of them. And one of them still survives today. But he retired from the military not long afterwards, and he retired on a pension, and it wasn't a big pension, and during the actual revolution he lost his pension and was pretty much brought to poverty. And he did live into the Napoleonic era, and Napoleon himself actually took pity on the man for, you know, the fact that he had made the contributions that he had and reinstated his pension so that he could at least live out the rest of his days, you know, with some security. But really the reason why he didn't continue is because his experiment was considered a failure by the Army, and therefore they did not continue any more funding for it. So that's why he did not continue. And the next question comes from Coltax 100. I think that's how I say it, right? And he asks, Did people use cars to transport goods or other things, or did they just transport people? Did they build trucks like today? Excellent question. And the answer is yes, they did build trucks during the 19th century, just not like we think of them today. At that time, the steam engine, a high-pressure steam engine that Richard Trevithick made, really was the only engine capable of moving heavy loads. And so they would build a wagon of sorts, a heavy wagon that you could put lots of cargo in, and use those for moving heavy loads across the country. And actually, there was a company in the United States called the Ware Steam Wagon Company, who was manufacturing basically steam-powered heavy trucks from 1861 to 1867. They were actually really a make in their own right, although they didn't make cars, but they did make a vehicle, and they made the same vehicle for a number of years. In fact, one could argue they were the first exporter of vehicles from the United States, because they did actually sell one to a priest out in what was at that time the Canadian British colonies, would eventually become Canada. So he became the first exporter. But the challenge with internal combustion engines is that they just weren't powerful enough and had enough torque to really justify using them for moving heavy loads. It wasn't until around 1895-ish that it was really even attempted. It wasn't really successfully done until around 1900, and even then, most of the cars that were built as trucks were basically light trucks. Of Naval train, for example, in France, basically was making a very small cycle car, but it had a truck bed on it, a small one that you could, use it as like a delivery vehicle or something like that. In the United States, there was a company called Autocar that also was building cars and trucks, and believe me, they're going to get their own episode at some point. And an argument can also be made that that particular company, Autocar, is the longest standing manufacturer of vehicles in the United States, because that company eventually was merged with another company called White back in the 1920s, and then they merged with another company and eventually became a company we know of as Freightliner. But there were trucks being built there. If you wanted something that was gas powered, it was going to be a truck that was a light duty truck, like a delivery vehicle. If you wanted something to move heavy loads, in 1900, you'd probably get a steam powered one. Autocar did build some gas powered trucks that were designed for heavy use, but they weren't really getting much popularity until about 1908, 1909. Same is true with another company called Mack, who started actually not with trucks but buses in the early 1900s. And and that's another story that we'll get to as well. But yeah, there were trucks that were out there. Gas powered trucks, as I said, mostly are going to be light duty at that time. Your heavy duty trucks were still going to be steam up until easily 1910. So there you go. And I have another question here. Another one from Spirit My Fox MY. And he asks, who in the world would use gunpowder to power a vehicle? I mean, what sort of engine was that? Unless it was just strapping rockets onto a sled or something. At what point? At which point? And I want pics as well. Okay. Well, this happened in the 17th century, so there's not a lot of pictures available. But it happened in China. There was a nobleman during the Ming Dynasty who decided that he had already built one car. In fact, I mentioned the car that was powered by slaves on, pedaling the thing. He's the guy who did that. And then he decided to try to literally affix rockets to a car. And so he got all these rockets onto this wagon and gave himself basically a reins, as it were, like you were doing for a horse, and lit the thing off and was ready to go, and the whole thing exploded, killing him and everyone else nearby. So as I said, you know, various different types of propulsion had been used or attempted to be used, and his was definitely an attempt and an unsuccessful one. So those were the questions that I had for my very first episode of Ye Olde Garage, and as I get more questions and more you know, interest in the channel, because it is a new channel. I mean, this is brand new. I mean, I'm just getting the wrapper off the thing. But definitely a shout out to Drachinifel. If you haven't watched him, you got to, because he has an awesome channel. I'll link it in this, you know, for naval history, and I'm definitely into naval history. Hold on, let me show you. As I said, I'm into naval history. Being a combat vet from the United States Navy during the Gulf War, I do love history. I love naval history. I love history in general. And even the history guy, I'll link his channel. If you haven't watched his, I mean, you got to. I mean, he's got all kinds of awesome stuff. But anyway, that's Ye Olde Garage for today. And hopefully we'll get some more questions and we'll be able to address them. So I'm Wild Bill. We'll see you next time. Peace.